Hello. It's really with Tom and Dave.
Let's go, Dave.
Yes,
Are you ready, buddy?
I'm gonna rally. I'm gonna try to do my best.
Are you ready?
I'm currently recovering from a real life encounter with Boeing aircraft.
Motherless. What happened? Tell me.
So for the second time in a month, I was flying back from the West Coast on Alaska Air, which I usually quite enjoy their service.
Okay.
But for the second time this month, there was a mechanical delay, as they call it.
Damn you, Alaska Air.
Yeah, last time my flight got canceled and I couldn't get on another flight to meet my connection. This time my flight was just delayed and I missed my connection.
Ugh.
So I went so it's essentially a 6-hour trip wound up taking 27 hours that time and 21, 22 hours this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
You know what? I think so.
That's terrible.
I think it was.
I feel for you. I'm mad on your behalf.
And I wound up on a red eye.
So when did you get in?
And I lost my first class ticket.
Oh my God!
I wound up in
They
coach.
took that from you too?
I wound up in coach. Yeah.
You know what would have been amazing if you had gone viral as one of those people freaking out at the little desk there, just like throwing traffic cones or whatever the hell they do. You know, they're falling over seats and getting into like bad fist fights with those poor poor people at the desk trying to contend with it. Although I don't know, I lose some sympathy for the people at the desk. I went through a bad one, not nearly that bad. I did get a flight kind of fucked up from a very simple one coming home from seeing Lucas up in Palo Alto, San Francisco airport. They just getting a flight to Burbank, a 45-minute flight, did result in a 24-hour delay, which was pretty special. Yeah,
because sometimes you feel like you're not getting a straight answer when you're asked.
You think?
Sometimes.
You think we don't get a straight answer?
Well, all I know is when I was trying to get a new flight, they just kept telling me, "Sir, I don't know what to tell you, but heavier than air flight is impossible."
What? Wait,
yeah.
What?
And I said, yeah. She said, man cannot fly.
No, that's true. I thought I got an extraordinary excuse because I was like, well, you've canceled my flights midnight. You're going to pay for a hotel room for me, right? And they were like, oh, no, this falls outside of the stuff that we can do because it's weather. And I was like, weather falls outside of the excuse platform? How is that? What? I mean, you got an engine trouble or weather, right?
Yeah. I know it's one thing. I said, well, can you switch me to another airline? And they said, no, because we found you another flight. Yeah, but it's a day later. And
they took your fancy ticket. That's bullshit. I can't do that.
I know.
Wow. I'm sorry. So, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone in the Reilly family, I just want to say, we're sorry. And
so when I glaze over every once in a while today, just know that I'm being a hero. That's the important thing.
Yeah, you're fighting through. This is for our listeners. This is to bring the truth to people, no matter how tired you are.
Yeah,
and sometimes
we were thinking, we were sort of. I think you had the wonderful idea that we should look back a little bit over some of the things we've learned.
Listen, we've
from
had
the people we've met.
We've had a hell of a ride so far. We are approaching. Chrissy, I'm not saying this is official, but we are approaching our 1-year anniversary of this extraordinary podcast. And I feel like I have been learning along with our audience quite a bit because we've had some amazing guests and some terrific conversations. If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe. And I will include you, Dave, in that. Have you liked and subscribed to our podcast?
Yes, and I've written a lot of letters to the editor.
Well, yeah. Well, no, we know all about we know all about the issues, but I think that's a separate thing. But have you actually subscribed?
I am a subscriber.
Okay,
I am subscribed.
I'm
not a Patreon. I'm not a Patreon because that seems to be that seems to cancel itself.
That does. Yeah, that does. Well, I mean, because you'll get this. But I enjoy, I sometimes re-listen, see how we're doing, see what we can improve upon.
Do you give us a thumbs up when you do? Oh, good. Because apparently that affects the algorithm and causes fireworks.
That's what I'm giving.
Does it work on my end?
It should.
Oh,
there you go, baby.
I was about to get so disappointed in my thumbs.
Yeah. So I mean, listen, we started this I was a complete noob.
It's true.
I was a true noob.
Yeah, you didn't know you didn't know anyone's names.
I didn't know a
Now you're
Diane
full of names.
Pasulka from a James Lakatsky from a Elgin
Yeah.
Air Force Base to a I don't know what.
Yeah. Did you know had you heard of Bob Lazar?
I had heard of
You'd
Bob
heard of Bob Lazar
Lazar.
and George,
I was
right?
familiar with George Knapp, of course, but I'm
But
I was
No Lou Elizondo. You didn't
no.
know.
I think our first dinner, just
Mhm.
to we can recap sort of how this kind of got started. Um, I don't know. I hadn't spoken to you in a minute, and Christina let me know. She was like, "Dave's really getting involved in UFOs," and I didn't know
Yeah.
if that was a good or bad thing. I didn't
No,
know what was
I
going.
think you called. It seemed like you called to see if I was okay.
I may have been concerned.
Yeah.
We hadn't spoken in a minute, and then we all got together for dinner with Chrissy and Christina, and it was great. And you kind of blew my mind. This was not at all something. Well, I mean, I guess it's something to be concerned about, but it wasn't. I wasn't concerned for you specifically. I was very impressed and interested and intrigued by who you had been meeting and speaking with, people like Leslie Kean of the New York Times and Lou Elizondo of Special Forces and counterterrorism. Just really some of the top folks in this game, and I
Hmm.
was fascinated and wanted to know more. And we began this sort of wild experiment, which I had about a 90-degree learning curve. Made
Yep.
very clear in our sort of, we almost had a test run of this podcast, which was sort of me exploring, like, is there a UAP movie here? Because that's my day job. And
Yeah.
I managed to have a
Get
conversation with Gary Nolan.
yes.
Um,
Yeah. We had
which
spoke for well over an hour with Gary that
yes,
day. I think.
he was very generous with his time and kind of wondering what the hell I was,
Yes. And
what
refuses
what
to
I
speak
wanted
to it.
from him. Yes, he
Yeah.
was confused by the whole thing, but it was great. He recommended some books for me, many of which I have now read. And we had sort of had that conversation. I brought you along because I needed someone who knew this topic to engage with Professor Nolan, Dr. Nolan. And anyway, he was great. We hope to officially have him on at some point.
Yes.
And the ball was rolling. And the first few conversations were pretty great. We had, right out of the gate, we spoke with Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal of the New York Times, who broke the incredible 2017 story. All of these I recommend our audience revisit or review for the first time. They're great conversations. We talked with Paul Hynek.
Paul Hynek was one of our early. I think was it
Jeremy
and
was
Paul
one of our
were
first out of the gate.
two guests. I think Jeremy Corbell,
Yes,
who the initiated,
I
where is produced, directed a documentary about Bob Lazar that became very well known. And
yeah,
of
that's
course
a terrific documentary and really kind of changed my perspective on the Bob Lazar story
Yeah, me
and
too,
just
yeah.
who he is as a person. It's if you are on that fence, because there's some twists and turns to that tale. It's a really great human look at Bob Lazar the person. And
I think you come out of that movie. You come out of that movie knowing, at least having a clear idea of who Bob Lazar is, whether or not you decide at the end of it that you believe his story or not. You sort of go, oh, he's not the person that has been depicted
yes.
in the media, in the past. He's not this, he's not this crazy guy. He's not this weird grifter. He's not any of the things people said he was. He was a very interesting, smart guy who claims to have had a remarkable experience working for the U.S. government.
And if you hear him retell it, it is mind-blowing and remarkably consistent through the years. It is the detail is belies fiction to an extent, but again, you can draw your own conclusions. But Jeremy did a great job with that, and it was great for me
Yeah.
to officially meet Jeremy, hear about your guys' experience. But I bring up Paul Hynek because that was a really it was about 3 hours that we talked with Paul. It
Yeah.
covered a lot of ground, but I would say what left its biggest impact on me, and I've debated a lot with friends since that conversation, was when we started to get into this interdimensional potential chemical gateway to the phenomenon that I had never considered or heard about, but struck me as something really novel and worth more investigation. He was. We were talking about DMT. We were talking about these, which is a variant of ayahuasca.
I think it's the active molecule in ayahuasca.
It is a molecule, yes.
Can be sort of what do you call it? Not
synthesized or distilled,
synthesized,
yes, into a smokable form. And we
yes.
are not. Well, I don't know. For you youngins out there, we are not advocating drug use. Consult your doctor and physician. However, there are extraordinary things. I read a few books because it's not quite for me yet in terms of really diving into the intense psychedelics. That was back in the day for me, when I was a youngin and my brain was young. However, I've read a lot about it since then. And
you read Michael Pollan's book?
I've read Michael Pollan's book. I'm reading Michael Pollan's book, to be honest, and I've also read. There is Alien Information Theory, which Paul recommended. There's another DMT study book, which was some medical studies they had done of it in the late 90s. The curious thing about DMT, first of all, it's a molecule that's ubiquitous in our natural world. It's in our bodies.
All living things produce it. It seems
it's released. It's released when we die. It's called the near-death experience drug. Because of the fact that it mirrors that experience, and it's also apparently released when we are in the uterus or when we're born, although apparently not released in C-section babies. And there is a suggestion that C-section babies have a harder time dealing with psychedelics as a result of not getting that dose of DMT as you exit the birth canal. As a C-section baby, I can attest to some challenging psychedelic experiences when I was young. But so it's easier to say what's not what DMT is not in our natural world and plants and whatnot, as opposed to what it is in. So it's very common. However, its effects are very uncommon, and it apparently shoots you out of your body at a high rate of speed. And there's a cast of characters that people tend to meet on these
the entities,
entities, which is utterly unique in my experience of drug use. I mean,
it seems unlike LSD or psilocybin, which seem to be fairly idiosyncratic experiences. There seems to be a homogeneity to the DMT experience.
Yes, which is bizarre to say the least, that everyone would meet. Where in the fuck is the script in your brain that has these blue elves, or the kind of in this geometric world, or these space beings, or the lizard crocodile telepathic crocodiles? I mean, there's it doesn't sound entirely pleasant to me, but some people have quite their reports back are very to them hugely impactful. And I don't know. There is a lot of kind of anecdotal evidence that that there's something happening with this particular drug, that there is something unique about the experiences that people have, and there's something akin to encounters that take place.
Yeah, and it does seem that there's enough specificity to it that there's a group of scientists, I forget where, I remember reading this a while back, that are trying to take all of the accounts of DMT experiences and basically chart maps
Yes.
of the physical space that these experiences occur in, because they think there's enough overlap and enough detail that they can actually go into this like cartographers and map this realm.
I believe experiments are underway to because part of it is a very short trip. It's only about 15 minutes. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times people don't feel like they can get to the level of talking to or interacting with these entities. So they are apparently doing these kind of psychic explorations where they keep them on a sort of IV, or they expand or extend the trip to do this, to kind of psychically map it to figure out just where exactly these people are, where are they going. And which is, pretty fascinating in itself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, we're living in interesting days. I don't know what to make of it. I do know, I spoke to just met one parents we were up visiting Luca. This was a neuroscientist who, he was dealing with dealing with anxiety and understanding anxiety and depression down to the atomic level. They've really figuring that out in the brain and how to deal with it. But when I asked him about stuff like DMT, he just said we really have no idea. I said where's the book written for these experiences that are just, if it's just in all, he just didn't know. He said he had colleagues that were really looking into it and incredibly curious to figure it out, but it was a true mystery. So it's not like he was like, that's just blah, blah, blah. He admitted to being very, very intrigued. And so I thought that was really, that started to kind of, just that talk with Paul and discussing this really expanded, I guess, my feeling like, wow, there's a lot more here than I
Yeah,
realized.
and there's some history to. I mean, I think it was Terence McKenna in some of his lectures. When he was alive, um, which is those were his most productive years, I think. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
but
arguably.
he did lectures where he just basically said that we're never going to get to the bottom of the UFO phenomena if we don't take hallucinogenics seriously as a tool for understanding it. Because he said that he believed there was an overlap, and that basically the hallucinogenics were a way of bridging the gap between us and these other beings, and trying to figure out what's behind the phenomena.
Yeah, I think this is obviously stuff that has been brought up and suggested in the past for sure and discussed. And I am truly an
Yeah.
amateur in this department, but
Well,
it
and it's definitely used as a derisive comment when someone says, "Oh, I saw a UFO." It's, "Oh yeah, how much acid were you on?"
yeah,
You
right.
know, and it's, you know.
But the idea of consciousness has now become front and center in the conversation among
Mm,
scientists and academics. It was discussed at length at the Saul conference that this idea that UAP encounters, even the very basic seeing, something in the sky, there almost always seems to come with it some sort of aspect of consciousness or aspect of communication, that just as these UAP appear material, there's something else at work. And it wouldn't surprise me as we continue to find ways to, I don't know, thin the membrane for us all, to peek outside the goldfish bowl, that we will realize there might be different access points. It just made me realize that this doesn't necessarily have to be ET. We're not necessarily talking about spaceships that come from 42 million light years away or something like that, that there could be parallel realities coinciding with ours, neighbors that we
mm,
have that we don't see or fully understand. I mean, it disturbed the shit out of me, but I couldn't rule it out, as I was sort of
yeah.
taking in some of this information and some of these stories.
Well, it's definitely. I mean, it's something that Jacques Vallée, I guess, has been talking about for 40 years or more than 40 years, going back to the early 70s. He was talking about the fact that there's more to this than just nuts and bolts, uh, you know, explanation. That it's not just going to be about finding machines and people flying them. That there's a deeper, weirder, more interesting aspect to it. That even though, as you said, even though some of the phenomenon is clearly physical, clearly material, we've recovered. We're now learning that it's very likely that we've recovered pretty extensive amounts of material, including fully intact ships.
That certainly seems to be a widely held belief among the UAP community and people that we, respect and think they're, on the level that it's taken for granted that there are these secret access programs of, and this is another kind of, the intensity of certainty with certain parties that are connected to the intelligence community that are have no doubt that there are legacy programs in place, that aerospace industries are in possession of craft and debris and potentially biologics that, as made famous by David Grush in his congressional testimony in 2023. Yeah, it's that's another, wow, where, we're in the future now kind of things that has seemingly become kind of common to us as we discuss this, but it's still, you bring this up to people like sort of outside this bubble, they're like, what the fuck? What?
Yeah. Well, even I guess in the I guess it's in the appendix of the George Knapp, James Lukatsky Collier book. What's it called?
So there's two. There's this. The first one is Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, and the second one, actually, we were talking about this in the Patreon. This is inside the U.S. government's covert U.S. initial revelations. These are basically kind of dry but still very compelling accounts of what OSAP, which was the $22 million Harry Reid funded UAP research program that really covered a lot of ground and investigated Skinwalker Ranch, etc. Sorry, that was you were making.
Oh no, I was just gonna say because Sean Kirkpatrick from Arrow, which people don't know, the official Pentagon current UFO research
disinformation program.
Disinformation organization. Yes, he recently tried to debunk all of the whistleblowers and witnesses that were talking to Congress by claiming that they all were confusing, that they all claimed that where they saw these recovered craft was inside a program called Kona Blue, and which turns out, George Knapp and Jeremy did a great thing on their Weaponized podcast about it, but and it's in the back in the appendix in there without the name of Kona Blue, because Kona Blue was a classified name, project name, but that was the program that Harry Reid went in to try and basically get SAP status.
It was never an official program. It was suggested as a name. It was suggested as a name for a program that never actually happened.
Yes, it would have been the next phase of OSAP. And that a big part of why it was being set up was to try and because there were people within military contractors who were interested in offloading some of this material that they had to OSAP, so that they could try to figure it out. Because these military contractors had kind of admitted, well, we've been trying to reverse engineer this stuff, but we failed.
It's probably hard to do.
Yeah,
that's why they couldn't figure it out either.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't put together, IKEA furniture at my house, much less an anti-grav engine.
Yeah.
But just going back to just briefly the consciousness aspect, I think there's still, even in some UFO circles, a little bit of a hesitation to discuss that as I kind of realized in our conversation with Leslie Kean, who was great, and that was a wonderful first. What a great guest to have, kind of right out of the gate for us. And please go back and listen to that interview, which was terrific. And her book, which is UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, is a must read if you want to really get some amazing accounts from.
Yeah,
if you
one of the first things I read when I started diving seriously into this.
Question the credibility of accounts. Well, this is cops, soldiers. I mean, whatever
fighter pilots.
If fighter pilots, she really went out of her way to sort of find essentially the best observers around the earth that have seen these things to just try to like land that plane. But interestingly, left out and admitted to sort of leaving out that some of these people, when they saw these things, were also having a kind of internal experience.
Yeah.
Whether it may have been an abduction or some sort of feeling of getting a message. She didn't really want to get into that.
Yeah.
Because I think she wanted these accounts to, again, there's a part of the military and a part of this, as we've seen in our discussion with fighter pilots like Alex Dietrich and Ryan Graves, amazing guests and amazing witnesses to this. They don't want to go there, understandably, because it's a very hard, it's not tactile at all. But it divides this conversation in a way, right?
Yeah, those people, they want to chase the stuff they can verify, the stuff they have data for, the stuff that's more experiential is hard, or the stuff with high strangeness is, and I can see where Leslie, I know that definitely a big part of Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean leaving that stuff out of the original New York Times stories was a lot of it was pressure within some of it was pressure from the editorial board of the New York Times, who weren't happy about what they were going to publish anyway. And, and they definitely, insisted on including some sort of debunking information in the article, and definitely didn't want to deal with anything that was like, the woo factor, as people say.
And listen, it's nothing against Leslie or any, or the Top Gun pilots we talked to or any of that. It's because there is this push in government. It's like Congress starts to pay attention when you make this an avionics security issue, yes. Right? When you make this an aerospace security issue, that these incursions into our airspace, which according to Ryan Graves happen daily, that they were certainly when he was flying, that this was not at all rare for UAPs to be disrupting training missions, to be on their radar. And when they had upgraded their radar, they were seeing even further and seeing even more UAPs. And yes, of course, some of them were drones. Yes, some of them were enemy drones or from Russia and China. Of course, most of those would be explained by that. And yes, there are balloons. However, there were seen many UAP that defied all physics in their speed, in their trajectory, in how much scientific, how much distance they could travel in a matter of seconds that would require power amounts. In fact, revisit our conversation with Kevin Knuth, Dr. Kevin Knuth, who's an amazing physicist who has done the work on the kind of Pentagon agreed upon videos that we've seen, like not just anything, but like Tic Tac and stuff like that. Revisit our interview with Kevin Knuth, because I thought that was revelatory too. It was just his
a very methodical breakdown of, well, if this is the data we have, this is the behavior observed, then here are the energies required to do these things.
Yes.
So here's how much energies you need for a craft to do these things.
And he has a ton of fun with it too. Yeah. But it's great because it really just grounds you in the energy involved and what would be involved. So I feel that's important, right? It's important to get the government's attention that way, and the public's too. It's a big swath of the public that aren't paying any attention.
If it can be, because there's always that big part of the UFO community that goes, why do they keep calling this a threat? This isn't a threat. And it's like, well, but that's how you get money if you're in the government for a project.
If you're going to mess up one of their pretty planes, you're going to get a lot of attention. They don't want that stuff blowing up
Yeah. So if you're the military's job is to deal with threats, the military's job isn't to be intellectually curious. You know.
Along those lines, in terms of underlining the threat, it reminds me of our 3-part interview with the great George Knapp. And
Yes.
one of the things that he discovered when he went to investigate the UFO, a decades-long Soviet program studying UFOs that the military sanctioned, was that there had been dozens and dozens of encounters between Russian pilots and UFOs through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and that several of those had resulted in aircraft going down, and 3 pilot deaths, to the point where the Russian government forbid the Russian pilots from engaging with the UFOs because of their incredible capacities for retaliation. And that was a quote. Although, look what I did. I didn't know that I could do that.
Yeah.
I made confetti fall. So, there is a precedent for the danger involved here. And I think that's why they have now separated the consciousness aspect of the UFO conversation with the material. And and I think there's a reason for it. We saw that there's also a little tension with that divide, because we saw it at the Saul conference, for example, which was the Stanford hosted conference, really, which became this kind of sort of conversation about the post-disclosure world that we are about to be living in, which was that was eye-opening to say the least. But you could see, right, Dave, like a difference between those who wanted to talk about a abduction phenomenon and that kind of thing, like Whitley Strieber, and then people that wanted to talk about, some of the intelligence officials like Carl Nell wanted to talk about, just the nuts and bolts. What did you see?
I think
what did you see?
Vallée also stood up and said we're not addressing the the abduction phenomena at all. Like, which was interesting because at one point Jacques Vallée wrote a whole book debunking abductions.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I read it. I can't remember the name of it now. So I'm sure so many people out there listening, I'm sure have read it.
You can't go wrong reading any of Jacques Vallée's work, although I might have an issue with his debunking the abduction phenomenon, but there's plenty of stuff we can read about that.
He's certainly moved past that now.
Yeah.
And he's definitely fully believes in abductions and crashed vehicles, which he didn't believe back then.
But I remember Whitley going up and basically saying, like, what about us?
Yeah.
There's a big contingent of, human beings, far more widespread than I think anyone can believe.
Yeah.
Or would like to believe, but it is in fact the case of abductions. And I'm reminded, as I reference often, my friend Gene Anzulis was one of our early podcasts, who has a remarkable,
very compelling story.
Very compelling and story about her abduction experience when she was 15 at her parents' house in Connecticut. And we're due for, I think we're due for a check-in with Jean. I certainly owe her.
Yeah.
I owe her a phone call. But I would love to have her back on and see kind of how she's been digesting all of this, sort of, because she had never spoken about it publicly. Shared with a few friends. She told us on the podcast she had just, she had told her kids when they were probably about 16. But it had a huge impact on her life.
Yeah, and I would like to hear if there's been any, if it's had an impact on her life now that she started, opening up about it.
She was not a UFO person. She hadn't read, and she had started to. We had spoken a little after, and I mean, we'd been texting back and forth, and she's been reading some Diane Pasulka and some of that. And subsequently, I read Diane Pasulka's Encounters, which is very good.
Yeah, I read that.
And so that was another. Now, I had heard Jean's story when I was 19, and it had really changed. My perspective on shit, for sure, because I had to kind of decide, this is my trusted friend, but this is my worldview, and how do these things, how are these things going to get along? But listen and hear for yourself Jean's account, one of our early episodes, but that was another incredible avenue that this phenomenon takes.
Yeah, and I know it. I know, and I sort of understand with the Soul Foundation, Gary Nolan and was it Peter Skafish, the gentleman started it up, right? That I understand the notion of, well, let's just
Peter Skafish, yeah,
that let's take this big a bite out of it now. And part of that is like they want to, as you said, they want to professionalize the topic, and I guess find and bring more credibility. So I can sort of see, all right, well, there's time to address everything, but maybe the first thing you do have to do is get people to take the machines seriously.
Yeah, I look at it makes sense. And again, a lot of this is about getting funding for further study. There are things like the Sol Foundation and the Galileo Project, which is Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb's. That's his project to try to get sensors, just trying to get things to look at the sky, because we just keep catching these things on like Ring cameras and whatever the phone can get, but we need focused cameras on the sky at hot spots to try to get so that's all reasonable. I agree.
That can gather data that won't be swallowed up by the intelligence community.
Yeah, totally. But we, go ahead.
Like I would say, like I know for me, there was a time when I really didn't want to think about the abduction phenomena, and I kind of pushed it off. But at a certain point, once I'd fully accepted the reality of the machines, that there are these machines in our interacting with us, you sort of go, it's illogical to deny the abduction phenomena at that point. Because if you're going to accept that there are non-humans piloting these highly advanced machines around our planet, you go, well, they're probably doing something. And if I can believe they're here, why would I have any problem believing they're abducting people and studying them, or perhaps have some sort of a program and, of manipulating people? It's kind of becomes nonsensical to not think about it.
Yeah, there is. It makes me think of a couple things. I mean, I would recommend our listeners review the work of Harvard psychiatrist John Mack, who late in his career took on this issue, really almost was martyred by this issue because Harvard rejected it. It was at a time where people weren't really discussing this. It was post Whitley Strieber's communion, but still really, people didn't know how to approach the work. I think we take it very seriously here. There's Gene's podcast. You should listen to that. There was Mario Woods, who was on more recently with his incredible story. I think that's a two-parter that we did with Mario Woods, he was a military police officer in South Dakota who in the late 1970s had an experience that defies belief, but is documented. He was interviewed by Arrow. He has, there are military records of the kind of burns he received during an amazing encounter at a nuclear missile base in South Dakota.
Which again, there is this long history of weird occurrences over nuclear missile bases. With one of the most famous being the Robert Salas story of from Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is basically up in the same general vicinity as, I guess it's Ellsworth. Was it Ellsworth Air Force Base that Mario Woods was at?
I don't know. I don't recall the name.
Well,
though I think now, I think that does sound like it's like the Ellsworth case. Yeah. Okay. I think that's right.
Yeah. And that was the thing is, it was amazing that the Robert Salas case, and which is not the only time this has happened, that they had a UFO appear over the missile silos, and 10 missiles went offline, were shut down, were made inoperable by the UFOs. And so the Mario Wood story, he saw these lights earlier in the day, in the sky. I thought it must be some sort of like B-52s. He thought a couple of
Or maybe
B-52s coming
helicopters.
through, or
He was
helicopters.
had a big light and he was signaling to it, and it was signaling back to him.
Yeah, so we thought, oh, okay, well, that must be it. And then, but then later that day, they got the word that there was something going on over an actual missile silo. And he got out there and like, he said there was a giant sphere,
the size of a Walmart,
the size of a Walmart.
Yeah,
yeah, but without parking.
Right.
But yeah, this giant sphere is like just hovering feet above a weapon that we have standing by to to destroy other countries in case of a nuclear war.
Yeah. Well, it also in George's our 3-part podcast with George Knapp, he talked about in Russia this group of defense officials that he spoke with told him about an ICBM missile base in Ukraine that and they gave him documentation of this where military eyewitnesses saw a group of lights overhead, were UFOs interacting with them, and then it turned on their missiles, turned them on, and took over the launch codes. And there was complete fucking panic at this ICBM base because they thought World War III was about to start. They couldn't turn off their fucking missiles.
Yeah. And you need to have top secret codes to start the countdown.
Fucking yeah. You need keys and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like the UFOs are very, very purposefully spending time around these military bases, which are our most powerful weapons, and they're saying, we see you and we are in charge here, but they don't seem to want to make themselves fully revealed to us. It remains this utterly weird interaction that we are having with this phenomenon kind of as a species, but they appear to take great interest in our nuclear capabilities.
Yes, and the accounts of anomalous craft showing up over, around nuclear weapons and energy sites goes all the way back to Los Alamos tests.
That's right,
leading up to the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
And I was going to say Fukushima, when there was the earthquake and the terrible tsunami there was a huge sighing. I think, and Kevin, did Kevin Knuth talk about this with us? Like there was,
I think he did, yeah. And there's actually, and there's video of it in the Netflix series Encounters for people who want to see it.
Yeah, watch the Netflix series Encounters to see some really wild UFO activity over the Japanese Fukushima plant. It was also, Kevin made the case that this is why these are likely not extraterrestrial visitors, that they may be living on the planet with us because of how quickly they appeared post crisis. In other words, he was using his sort of the physics of this, of even if you somehow knew something had happened and you were all these light years away, and even if you had a wormhole and could get here, he was making the case that it's the sudden appearance of these craft, lights, whatever you want to call them, that suggested that that they could be much closer neighbors. We may be sharing the planet with them.
Yeah, the notion that they've always been here and that they're co-evolved with us, or also, I mean, they could be extraterrestrials that just have set up camp.
Sure.
I mean, we have forward bases all around the world. The American military, so like if something's going on somewhere in the world, we don't have to deploy from U.S. soil.
Right.
They're already within range of pretty much every place on Earth.
Right. And when we're talking about modes of travel, it reminds me of our talk with Dr. Michael Masters,
yes.
who wrote a book. Forgive me, Michael, if I can't, but it was about the fact that these could be time travelers.
Yes, the extraterrestrial model.
It could be us coming back to visit us.
Yes, because his specialty was examining the evolution of skulls, basically.
Right. Right.
Um, so he was looking at how human skulls have evolved from our earlier ape like ancestors, and and basically sees a pattern that if you extrapolate forward in time, the way our skulls have been evolving um, is very similar. Would eventually get you to the kind of shape that we're seeing in the classic grays.
Right. He takes the communion example, or the grays, or this. He takes this big-eyed bipedal being, and he just starts to, well, he starts to sort of remove options, because in a really interesting and intelligent way, he dismantles this idea that that bipedal beings like us would be ubiquitous anywhere. Like, we are a very, very unlikely biological structure for most planets. Any planet kind of bigger than Earth, most likely the gravity of other celestial bodies would push biology to the ground, right? You're more likely to see a kind of lizard model or something with legs spread out, something closer to the ground, that even our model comes with such, we walk around, we've got back problems, we've got this and that, it's a strange thing to have this sort of upright kind of being walking around. So he's saying that the likelihood of the visitors from outer space coming to see us would look exactly like us, would have sort of the same kind of, facial structures and a kind of, so that was one of his, I found, really interesting approaches, because yes, he's a specialist. I recall in like jaw bones and how those developed, and how we would start, how early human beings or whatever our previous ancestors would have started to look up, or why they would need to adapt to kind of looking up as they walk as opposed to looking down at the ground, And so that was a fascinating. I never had. I mean, I would hear like temporal visitors, and like that would be one of my tune-outs. I'm like, okay, like I can handle. Like, just just don't let me exclude time travel as an option here. And sure enough, you talk with someone who, I don't know. Listen, that's as viable as any. What the hell do we? Something weird's happening.
Yeah. Again, that pattern of the credulity window constantly getting blown open.
Yeah, I mean,
despite our resistance to it.
I know it is. My God, it is a slippery, just to such a cliche. But you hear these. You hear people who've really intelligently worked through a lot of this stuff, and of course, I mean, what I'm left with is, there is so clearly something going on. There's so clearly some kind of interaction happening, definitely in our airspace, and definitely with people's consciousness. That there's even your good friend Robin Roseanne, who had not spoken publicly about her experience. Her entire fucking neighborhood
saw a gigantic craft
in the sky.
Above the Hudson Valley.
Part of a famous case, right?
Yeah. Well, Hudson Valley continues to have inordinately high incidence of UFO sightings to this day. But yeah, she was part of it back in the 80s when they were being swarmed. It's one of the last cases that J. Allen Hynek investigated. Was and basically he came out and said, well, this, if you looked at nothing but this case, that should convince you that UFOs are real and something very strange is going on. But as Robin said, like, that at one point she became terrified as she was watching this craft, because she felt like this craft was watching her.
Right.
Like it was interacting with her, and she became terrified and like wanted to get away from it.
Right.
And obviously it was also very weird that, as you said, her entire neighborhood, like thousands of people, saw this thing. And they were all out on the street, standing there looking up at it.
And pilots were her neighbors, and they were like, "We don't got this."
Yeah,
like this ain't us.
But she said, but then very quickly, no one would talk about it.
And she's read in the paper this bullshit account that they said this was just a squadron of planes that were,
Yeah, a bunch of people in ultralights spoofing.
And she knew from what she saw that that was not the case. But I think we've learned how easy it is for the government, can just try to poke one little hole, and I think our brains want that. They want to revert back to the norm, right? It's very hard for us to stay out in this space. It's very easy to go back like, oh, okay, thank you for explaining that, because the alternative is confronting this uneasy reality.
Yeah, and definitely, I think definitely the most of the media have been very well conditioned to and relieved when they're given any kind of a crumb that they can ingest and go, there, I don't have to think anymore.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for me. I mean, I'm honestly, there have been some nights where I'm like, what the fuck, man? I mean, it's like, it's a lot to take in, and I want to go like, okay, I'll hear something, or something will kind of get debunked, or it'll seem like, because there's kooks, we know, they're like, we kind of try to avoid them on this show, but we know it invites the crazy. It invites it is that, of course, that holds true, despite the fact that I think academia has really begun to take a leading role in this conversation away from government, because many people we trust do not believe that the government will really truly come forward or get their shit together. It feels like the executive branch and the intelligence community have a chokehold on it, and that congressional efforts to try to break through are good and noble, and we hope they continue, but so far have been unsuccessful, and really, like, they're trying to cajole the Pentagon into investigating itself.
Yes, which they don't want to do, because they already know what they'll find.
Yeah. There's not a lot of motivation there.
It's like why I don't want to go to therapy. I don't need to be told that. I don't need to told all that.
Yeah. Nobody wants the truth. People don't want the truth.
Mm.
And this is a question. It's a question at the Seoul conference. We had an interaction with Chris Mellon, who was, I believe, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence for President Obama.
Kind of the highest ranking civilian position in the intelligence community.
And a very respected voice in this movement, and was present at the Seoul conference, gave his own speech himself. And, I asked him, what questions should we be asking on this show? For example, what should we be talking about if we're talking to, the public and community? And he said, should we disclose? And I thought that was interesting, because I thought we're all just kind of hammering for the truth. But there was a lot of talk at the Seoul conference about, is this best? Will it be too unpleasant for the public to absorb? Will it disrupt religions and the economy and so forth and so on?
Or even like, will we accelerate whatever the game plan is of the non-humans?
I guess that's the Independence Day model of this. That I'll debate you on. I find that one a little hard to gronk. To me, it's like, I don't know. Are they listening to this pot? Like, what constitutes enough knowledge that they come out and are like, all right, now we're going to blow up the White House or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if there's that sense, like, I've heard like Lou Elizondo talk about it, that if you you have certain intelligence on your enemies, but you don't discuss it, because if you discuss it, you accelerate the likelihood they're going to use those capabilities.
Sure. Yes. And he has certainly thrown out some concerning tidbits. He's like the master of the what if, I'm not saying it, but I'm saying it. And
they just imagine.
Let me just posit this question for no reason at all. Yes, I mean, sure. If you're scouting and checking somebody out at the enemy territory and they see you, do you react? I get that analogy. To me, it's such an amorphous, difficult to define, like, what constitutes understanding at this point. I mean, how would we, It
Well,
seems
yeah,
like,
whatever. Yeah, I definitely agree with you to the extent that I think like whatever's behind the phenomena seems so unperturbed by us
yeah.
that that I don't know that there's anything we can do that will throw them off their game plan or that will change. They seem whatever's going on doesn't seem to be certainly responding in any kind of a uh, uh, short term way with us.
It seems, I believe I'm correct. I think even in our very first conversation that was not on our Really podcast, but when we were talking to Professor Nolan, I think he characterized it as indifferent. That
Hmm.
they're just sort of seem like, yeah, they kind of say, don't be afraid, in these abduction tales, they're sort of saying, no, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. It's fine. While they're doing something incredibly scary to people. When they're, paralyzing them and performing surgeries or what have you, they're saying, don't be afraid. It's like, then you don't really understand what, what emotion is, do you? You really don't quite get it, because obviously, I think Jean said, and they were saying this to her, and
Yeah,
she was not alone. It's a very kind of common communication that takes place between abductees and these beings, which is like, we're not here to hurt you, and they're
yeah,
terrifying and traumatizing the people that that they're saying this to. So it does suggest a kind of either utter ignorance of what feeling is, which is an interesting
yeah, or
aspect
maybe
of the conversation, or that they don't give a shit.
because there's also the "don't be afraid" could be because I'm trying to think of her name now. I'm blanking on her name. The autistic scientist who helped develop like techniques for slaughterhouses. They did a movie about
Oh
her
yes.
recently.
Oh, now that you mention, I know who
I'm
you're
blanking
talking
on her
about.
name. Very interesting woman.
Yes, it'll come to me.
And but essentially her job was to make cattle not be afraid as
Yes.
they're on their way. Which in her mind she just wanted this to be a less traumatizing experience for the cattle that are about to be slaughtered.
Mm-hmm.
But she studied their responses, and she built the chutes to sort of carefully sort of compress and keep them calm, and you know so maybe that could also be the aliens. They're just saying don't be afraid, because afraid people are much more difficult to handle.
Yeah, I agree. They seem to do what they want, and they seem to demonstrate where necessary that they're completely in control.
Yeah,
And that is that's concerning, and it makes me think of the hitchhiker phenomenon a little bit. I don't know why, but that's one thing that I learned that I did not know before, and wasn't thrilled to learn, but
hmm,
learned it anyway after we talked about Skinwalker Ranch and all these other. Oh, by the way, Skinwalker Ranch. We talked with an executive producer of that show.
yes,
We learned that this was a pre-existing
yeah.
scientific group.
TJ Allard, TJ
TJ
Allard,
Al, exactly,
yeah,
and that was a great conversation. And subsequently we realized that Skinwalker Ranch was at the kind of a focus of OSAP and the government's investigation. The government dedicated millions to OSAP, which was then looking at Skinwalker Ranch. For anybody out there who's like sees these shows on TV and like, this fucking thing, it's all bullshit. Skinwalker Ranch is considered by the intelligence community to be a place of authentic phenomenology. I just made that
yeah,
up, I think.
and
But
continues to be, and it's because it went. I mean, it started out, I guess, with the NIDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science.
yes, Robert Bigelow's efforts in the
Yes,
90s with
along with
George Knapp was involved with that. But
the pilot Edgar Mitchell was involved with
yes,
it.
to study,
Apollo pilot.
Robert Bigelow bought Skinwalker Ranch and ran a bunch of studies there and tests on what takes
Yeah,
place there, which is everything from poltergeist to creature encounters to UFOs, etc. It runs the
yeah.
gamut.
So you had NIDS, then you had OSAP studying the place, and OSAP was doing lots of other studies all around the world at the time. We should make that clear. That
Yeah, it was not just Skinwalker Ranch. That was
yeah,
a
Don't
branch
listen.
of
Don't
of
listen
some
to
of their.
Green Street. Yeah, they were all over the world doing. They had a staff that were doing stuff all over the world.
But I never knew
Um,
that was. I mean, the shit was real. I'm watching a reality show, and I'm assuming this, that, and the other thing. But that group, first of all, that group, other than Travis Taylor, the host, that group was together prior to any television show. That
yeah,
was
They've been there for quite a
bought
while.
by
Yeah.
Brandon Fugel, real estate billionaire, and they were just doing research to figure out what the hell's going on at this place, which had a legacy, even with Native Americans and you know the tribes that had occupied that land, which apparently were warring tribes, warring groups, but it always had a reputation.
For strange things going on there.
High strangeness and dimensional portals,
Yes,
etc.
ancient petroglyphs depicting portals and spirals that for stone spirals on the top of the mesa that for some reason at certain times just light up.
It is
on their own.
It is uncanny what goes on there. One of our favorite shows, and sure, it's a reality show, and I'm that we know things can, but what we can say
style to it.
What we can say is there is a legitimacy to Skinwalker Ranch that certainly has interested the government for many decades.
And if you watch the show now, I mean, there are times while they've been making that show that they've been under surveillance by the military and by intelligence.
Yeah. There's a weird, and this is what fascinated me too. There's just such a strange kind of collision between media and this phenomenon, and like it's hard to separate the two. And I, found it, difficult to contend with, because you have this successful show on TV that is actually doing a documentation of real events. And there's, it's an uneasy kind of marriage between the media and this phenomenon, which I think makes sometimes it's legitimate. It puts its legitimacy in question sometimes.
Yeah. And well, it's a weird thing. I mean, because like Travis Taylor, you said he's on the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch television show, but he's also a very renowned rocket scientist.
He was recruited for Jay Stratton's UAP task force.
Yes.
I know he's legit. He's done a string of reality shows over the course of the last 15 years, and yet he's also this physics guy. He's as advertised in terms of his credentials and taken very seriously, which I find fascinating.
Yes, me too.
And listen, we want people to take us seriously. In our efforts here, we will continue to try to bring you the best voices on this topic, and occasionally other topics.
I mean, it's been like a real, it's the real privilege of doing this podcast has been that it's been a wonderful excuse for us to talk to really interesting people.
Oh my God, totally.
Who know so much more than we do, and to get to just ask them questions, and hear their explanations.
I'm grateful to you for kind of helping bring me into all this, because it has really been it's been fun, it's been spooky, it's been cool, it's been great to I agree, meeting so many fascinating people and hear their stories, and we're really grateful to all of them for sharing their stories with us and their expertise, and we hope that you out there are enjoying it too, because we're enjoying bringing it to you, and we're enjoying hanging out together.
And if you're too discouraged that that Joe Biden hasn't hopped onto a flying saucer on the White House lawn yet, just be aware there's so much that has happened in the last couple of years. And there's been more progress in this last year than I'm aware of in the entire history of the movement to get to the truth of the UFO phenomena. I had lunch with Leslie Kane a little while ago, and I asked her what is your level of optimism, and she's still 100% optimistic that we're going to learn what's going on.
Wow,
figure it
really?
Out. Yeah, the public will learn what's going on.
I think part of that is it's already happening, but I think it's a good point to bring up that I get, because we're having these conversations every week, I get anxious for more data and more information and more revelations, when in fact it's been a spoiling few years of breakthrough and and government interaction with this issue, and government action on this issue, and laws passed to try to crowbar open some of these legacy programs. And so, yeah, we are hopeful, and I too will be optimistic, and we'll be here. We'll be here to report it, for sure. But any parting words, Dave? As we did this mini review, and many more to kind of talk about. But our first little, as we approach our anniversary.
I guess all I can say is, I guess we started out this, part of the reason we started this was we wanted to, we hoped by us, two fairly normal people, discussing this seriously, we could help in some way, like lower the stigma and I think that's happening. I think I've seen it even just in this last couple of years that I get far fewer people avoiding eye contact and wandering off to the other end of the party.
I know. I was worried about becoming that guy, right? But it's, I think people are, if anything,
I'm getting more and more people coming up saying, "Hey,
right?
It's UFO thing.
Yeah,
tell me some more."
Yeah, I know. Me too. I mean, friends want to know, and
so it's just like if anyone out there who's listening to us is curious about, or people out there who've had experiences, whether it be just seeing an object or a craft, or more intensely an abduction experience or an interaction, I think it's I think the human trauma of it, even if we aren't getting full disclosure from the government, I think we're lowering the level of trauma caused by the stigma.
I hope so, yeah.
And I think that's a hugely positive thing, because to me, I'm a human, so I'm still more interested in humans than the non-human intelligence.
Yeah, and I think a lot of our guests who have been brave enough to talk about their experiences really push that forward, and we'll always be open to that. I find those stories the most compelling conversations, really, and we'll keep bringing them, to you, and hopefully you will keep listening and like and subscribe. Again, if you like what you've been hearing, and please review some of the episodes we've talked about and some of these great conversations, and we'll keep bringing them to you. And we're excited for Contact in the Desert coming up.
Yes, we'll be at Contact in the Desert soon. This will be our first sort of more traditional UFO conference that we'll be attending, because we did attend the Soul Foundation, which was a symposium. As opposed to a conference.
Yes.
So this will be our first UFO conference.
I know. I'm not sure if this will be on. I don't know if this will be on after or before, but in any event, also please send questions. We'll answer them on our Patreon, and sign up for our Patreon to get the extra nitty gritty expertise that we have to offer just for our special Patreons.
Yes, and by the way, when you're listening or watching the Patreon segments, it's clothing optional.
So that's exciting. You never know what Dave will or won't be wearing.
Oh, and you at home too. The people at home,
that's true. We don't care what you're wearing.
Whatever they want.
Yeah.
Normally, if you're just tuning to the regular podcast, we require you to be fully dressed.
That's true. That's true. There is a dress code.
Patreons, you can watch naked.
All bets are off. It's red light time. Okay. Well, on that note. Always good to end on some nudity.
Yeah. And love. Yes.
Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. I hope you have better airline luck in the near
Boeing,
future.
Please, Boeing, pull it together.
My God. All right. Godspeed.
All right. Bye.
What's the pulse within the super cool crowd on the UFO UAP topic? I feel the majority of the world looks to entertainers to point them in the direction of acceptable thoughts.
Well, I still think am I wrong? Within the entertainment community, there's very, very few people who are openly engaging with the subject. Would that be fair, Tom?
I think there is I believe just under the surface, there's a lot of conversation about it. There is, I believe, I don't believe, I know for a fact that in the next couple of years, we will see probably an explosion of fiction and nonfiction content coming out of Hollywood regarding this kind of topical information right now.